They want you to protest. More importantly, they want you to commit violence. This is part of their plan. I'm Steve Sandford. You're watching Dominion Report. I want to tell you a story, a true story, about government overreach, about protests, violence, and where it led. This happened in the past, in a country elsewhere in the world. Following a multi-year propaganda campaign that demonized a certain subset of people as evil foreigners, the government there began using a paramilitary force to abduct those foreigners and to detain them without trial. There were protests. Citizens stood against the unlawful arrests, the unlawful detainment, and the imprisonment of those people whose right to legal representation and right to a fair trial was being ignored. The government's paramilitary force stood against the protesters, and they employed tactics that were well known to encourage protesters to become violent. The protests became violent. The government then responded with an even larger paramilitary police presence, which of course spiraled into bigger protests and more violence. Protesters themselves were arrested, detained, and imprisoned, also without due process, and that included those who were being violent and those who were not. Now, some of this country's citizens, those who believed the government's earlier propaganda that demonized the foreigners, cheered on the police and condemned the protesters. And they did not fight against the violation of the rights of the foreigners or of the protesters. As the government response grew, the protests grew to other areas around the country. And in each area, the government continued to employ tactics that encouraged protesters and protests to become violent. As the protest and the violence reached a critical mass, the government enacted an extreme measures law, which gave them extrajudicial authority. This was advertised as a temporary measure until order was restored. But of course, it wasn't temporary. The government had engineered a power grab, and they did not give the power back. The extrajudicial measure gave the government permission to arrest and detain without cause those who the government deemed were a threat to national security. Opposing politician parties were disbanded by force. Their leaders were arrested, labeled as traitors of the state, and imprisoned. Most of them were executed without trial. With political opposition deemed illegal, subsequent elections became meaningless. At the same time, the government banned public assembly. The right to free speech was revoked. The freedom of the press was also revoked. The media industry was disbanded, senior members were executed, and a single government source of truth was established. Protection against arbitrary arrest and detainment was lost. The right to a free trial was discarded. Those deemed dissident could be shot on sight by police. The privacy of postal, telephone, and electronic communications was also revoked. This government went full fascist, and they did so by creating the environment that they needed to enact the extrajudicial act that allowed for the authoritarian power grab. That act was called the Reichstag Fire Decree. And I'm talking about Nazi Germany, and I'm talking about what happened in the 1930s. The Reichstag Fire Decree transformed Germany into a dictatorship under Adolf Hitler. Hitler, of course, went on to murder over 10 million of his own citizens in a process designed to systemically and mechanically eliminate an entire cultural group of people, of his own citizens. This was actually the group that was earlier mislabeled as foreigners, which they weren't. He started a world war that lasted 6 years and cost 80 million people their lives. More than 2/3 of those were civilians. And of course, it didn't end well for Hitler either, or his top team of Nazis. This playbook for authoritarian power grab is not unique to Nazi Germany. A variation of the very same thing happened in Italy under Mussolini, and it happened in Chile under Pinochet, and so many other fascist leaders around the world. And once again, it is also happening, this time right in front of our eyes in the United States. The most important thing to understand is that this is part of a plan. Without that knowledge, we are just reacting knee-jerk to each step in the process and not seeing the bigger picture and not seeing the end goal. So to summarize, that plan, as it happened in Germany, in 4 steps. Step 1, anti-foreigner propaganda. Step 2, government undertook activities that they knew would generate protests. Step 3, they employed tactics to cause those protests to become bigger and to become violent. And step 4 was extreme measures, a legal act that awarded the government authoritarian powers. The United States currently is at step 3. This video is one of 3 that I've published recently, and they all kind of go together, so it's probably worth your while to see all 3 of them. I'll put the links to the other 2 in the comments below. In the meantime, stay calm, stay strong, and elbows up.